and, interested community members in terms of support groups or education programs that are not virtual, but we're located in the Philadelphia area.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, my clock just struck 2, so I am going to take the slide down and greet everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the KU ADRC's weekly webinar. I see more and more folks coming in, which always makes me happy. Thank you all so much for being here. Another Thursday is here, and we are gathering to hear some great information. I will invite everyone to mute yourself if you're not speaking. You may choose to have your camera on or off. Of course, I always tell you I love seeing your faces, but if you do not want your camera on, that is quite all right. As we have our presentation, please use the chat feature if you have questions or comments, and I'll monitor the chat so you don't have to try to do double duty. And as we have questions or comments, I will be sure to note those, and we'll have time to answer them as we can. Okay. We are recording, as I think everybody probably saw when you joined the meeting. And so we will have this available hopefully as soon as possible, by tomorrow, maybe even on our website, so that you can watch it again if you like, or share it with friends, family, keep it in your pocket for future reference. So with that said, I am happy to introduce our speaker for today. With us, we have Will Ryder, who is the Education Program Manager at the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration, AFTD, as you can see on his name on his box here in Zoom. Will works to expand AFTD's relationships with healthcare providers in order to support early FTD diagnosis and comprehensive person-centered FTD care. Will has been in the field of dementia for more than 30 years, and in a variety of local and regional settings, he has provided direct support and education to people living with dementia, their care partners, and healthcare providers. Previously, Will worked at the Family Caregiver Alliance in San Francisco, as well as the Massachusetts, New Hampshire chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. He was the Health Systems Director for the Alzheimer's Association, Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania region. And in all of his work, Will has initiated and strengthened connections to clinicians and regional health systems. One other thing that Will doesn't have in his bio, and maybe he did not put this in here because he knew he was speaking to a Kansas City audience, and I didn't warn him that I was going to say this. So Will, just a little bit of trash talking here. The Eagles, who I think are from Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, I
Who I
believe
think we
so.
met earlier this year, right?
That's
So they're coming
right.
back. We're getting together again on our home turf. How about that?
Yeah. Well,
On
I'm still in recovery, so be gentle.
Be gentle. Okay, we won't, let's not get too cocky anyway. But I know lots of us in Kansas City are excited about Monday night in particular, and getting those Kelsey brothers together again, and whoever else may choose to show up. Um, so, Will, I know everybody's going to hear you today with bated breath talking about FTD. And knowing that you are in the Philadelphia area is just the icing on the cake. So, welcome, Will. I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you everybody for being here. Now we'll talk about FTD and not football. Okay.
Okay. Well, that's good because I know more about FTD than I know about the Eagles and football. So thanks for the great introduction, Kelly, and for inviting me to speak to your audience, as well as to the KU Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. I am going to share my screen. And Kelly, if you can go ahead and confirm that once I do that, it's viewable and good. So let me do that now. And I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to go here, and then I am going to go here and here. And so hopefully you can see just my slide presentation and not other things on my other screen.
It's exactly right. Thanks, Will.
Terrific. And can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Great, great. So thank you all for joining me. FTD is, a not commonly known type of dementia in terms of the general public. And unfortunately, it can be misdiagnosed by healthcare professionals and is not always well understood by folks in the medical and professional care giving settings. And so we try to do what we can to share greater awareness, information, and as Kelly mentioned, to encourage earlier detection, diagnosis, and better quality FTD care. I want to just share that the organization that I work for, we've been in existence for over 20 years, and we're a national nonprofit. Kelly mentioned that, our office is in the Philadelphia area, but we really talk to families across the country, provide support and information. We do educational programming and specific information for healthcare professionals. We fund and encourage research participation. We also have an advocacy arm in terms of advocating for better supports for families. So we do a lot, and it does reach people across the country. Kelly gave me 20 minutes to talk about FTD. And so I have my watch going, and FTD is a complex array of disorders. So I'm going to try to give you a whirlwind snapshot of FTD. I do want to say that it's true when anyone talks about a dementia, we tend to speak, about the common symptoms or the typical age of onset or the general course of the disease. And I think it's definitely true for people with FTD that each individual is impacted in different ways, depending upon, where the neurodegeneration starts, also how quickly and how expansively the neurodegeneration moves forward. And so some of the things that I'm going to talk about are more typical, but maybe doesn't tell the story if you have someone with FTD in your family, or not exactly the same picture. So I'm going to first just quickly kind of level set and just say the word dementia. So dementia in and of itself is not a specific disease or a disorder. We think of it as a medical syndrome. It's a term that doctors and clinicians use to really define and describe a collection of symptoms, which often include changes in memory, problems with thinking and problem solving, changes or challenges with communication, personality, visual spatial recognition and movement. And so these cognitive changes, any of these symptoms can be part of a dementia, depending upon often the specific disease process that's causing dementia. And on this PowerPoint slide, you really have a very abridged list of causes of dementia, with Alzheimer's being the biggest cause of a dementia, and then some others: Lewy body, vascular dementia, mixed dementia, and then finally frontotemporal degeneration. So now I'm going to talk just about FTD with some comparisons to Alzheimer's along the way, since that's more commonly understood. So FTD, unlike Alzheimer's, is a family of diseases or disorders that collectively we call FTD. And I'll say more about that shortly. FTD is one of the leading causes of dementia in people that are younger than 60. So it's called a younger onset dementia because the age range in which a person typically will start exhibiting the symptoms is in the mid-40s to mid-60s, which clearly is younger than Alzheimer's, where for any of us and for us to develop Alzheimer's, the risk is going to increase as we get older, with the biggest risk being people who are 85 and above. But with FTD, the symptoms and the disease progression starts earlier, and typically proceeds, within the life expectancy, there's certainly a range, but 5 to 8 years It depends on when a person is diagnosed. It's also very individual in terms of whether the disease progresses slower. People certainly live beyond 8 years. People also can progress more quickly. Another distinction between FTD and Alzheimer's disease is that memory loss, so short-term memory loss, which is commonly associated with Alzheimer's disease, so forgetting something that happened yesterday, or forgetting what you had for breakfast, or forgetting that you just had a conversation with someone, your wife, about, when is your cardiovascular appointment? So that kind of forgetting is not typical as one of the symptoms related to FTD. So the changes that are more typical earlier in the disease of FTD are changes in behavior and personality, problems with communication, both that can be expressive communication, such as speech, or understanding communication, or movement challenges are the typical early symptoms. And memory is generally well preserved, though some people with FTD will have memory problems. Another unfortunate distinction with FTD is that it takes on average a pretty long time to get a diagnosis. Imagine 3.6 years on average to achieve an accurate diagnosis. So how does that happen? Well, unfortunately, sometimes people initially receive an inaccurate diagnosis. So a person that has the behavioral symptoms, their primary care doctor might refer them to a non-neurological specialist, and they might be referred to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and they're diagnosed with depression. Or a person might be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. The challenge is often that with an inaccurate diagnosis, the treatments do not work. They're not effective. And that can be frustrating for the person and also for the family caregiver, which leads us on to the next box there, which is without an accurate diagnosis for 3.6 years, it can be very burdensome for the family, and in particular, the primary caregiver or care partner, because I mentioned the disease has a younger onset. When you think about being in your middle years, in your late 40s, 50s, and early 60s, many people are still working. They have a job, and their health insurance is associated with their job. They're paying off a mortgage. They're saving for retirement. They might have college-age children that they're paying for tuition, or with younger onset, sometimes families even have children who are in grade school. So all of these are things that can be very different to the care and caregiving of a person with FTD. Let's just take a quick view of the brain. And what you have here are the frontal lobe, which is the blue portion of the brain on this slide, the temporal lobes, which one of the lobes is in green on this slide. So you're kind of looking at the brain from the side. And then the basal ganglia is kind of underneath and behind the temporal lobe, and the brainstem goes down from the brain. So these are all key areas of the brain that can be targeted with an FTD disorder, depending on where the neurodegeneration starts. So the frontal lobe is often where a person with BVFTD, behavioral variant FTD, that's where the neuronal deterioration will begin, because it controls behaviors and emotions and problem solving and safety awareness, as well as other functions. If you look at the temporal lobes, there's a lot of aspects of communication that are localized in the temporal lobes, such as speech and visual memory and understanding of pictures, shapes, and faces. So that impacts communication. And then the basal ganglia and brainstem are key local areas, certainly for movement, as well as cognition and some other activities associated with cognitive function. So that leads us to, if we think of those parts of the brain, then these are the FTD disorders. So before I talk about each of those a little bit, what I will say is FTD, my organization is the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration, but many organizations and academic medical centers will use the term frontotemporal dementia, which may be the case at KU. Other researchers and clinicians may call it frontotemporal lobar degeneration. And then you may have even heard Pick's disease, which is a historic term. I think of that as a term that's used more in the past, but it is still sometimes used today. Certainly, if you say FTD, it kind of unifies all of that. So with FTD, the most common disorder causing FTD is behavioral variant FTD. With that disease and disorder, the typical symptoms that appear first and are more common are things like apathy, disinhibition, so behavior that's socially inappropriate in a public setting. Loss of empathy, so a person loses the ability to really understand or empathize with the emotions of others. There can be changes, really severe changes in eating habits or diet, compulsive ritualistic behaviors, and problems with executive function. So, and I'm going to move through these pretty quickly. I want to acknowledge that AFTD has a number of recorded webinars about each of these disorders, as well as fact sheets that really go into depth with some of the symptoms. But I only have so much time, so that's what I'll say about BVFTD. With primary progressive aphasia, there's progressive changes in communication and language. And so either difficulties with speaking or so expressing oneself or comprehending language. And in terms of primary progressive aphasia, there are 3 specific subtypes with non-fluent agrammatic PPA. Persons have increasing difficulty with actual speaking. They can recall or understand the meaning of words, but their speech is very labored. And I would say even more than slow, it's almost appears painful in terms of trying to get the words out. Along with that, they may omit words or mix up words in sentences and can develop swallowing difficulties. Semantic variant is a progressive loss of meaning with the words, with semantic variant of PPA. So a person retains the ability to speak, but the speech will be comfortable or more comfortable than agrammatic PPA, but there will be meaning that will be lost. So it will be vague or difficult to understand the person when they're expressing themselves. And finally, logopenic, with that variant, people have difficulty remembering words as they're speaking. So their speech, they may hesitate or have slow speech, but it's not the labored kind of difficult of getting words out like with the agrammatic or non-fluent variant. So I'm going to move on to the motor function movement disorders of FTD. And first, I'll acknowledge the corticobasal syndrome, sometimes called corticobasal degeneration, and progressive supranuclear palsy are sometimes called the atypical Parkinsonian disorders because they have similarities in terms of the symptoms with Parkinson's, but they have different underlying degenerative processes. But with corticobasal syndrome, Typically, movement challenges begin on one side of the body, but eventually will progress to both sides. A person may have what's called limb apraxia, which is the inability to compel your hand or arm or leg to complete a desired activity. So an example would be challenges with opening a door, difficulty with using a television remote. Tripping and falling can become issues, and stiffness or resistance to movement can be symptoms. So this is really a very abridged list. There's more I could say about this. I'm going to move on to progressive supranuclear palsy. And one of the symptoms that can sometimes be early and is noticed by movement specialists are changes in the difficulty with moving the eyes up and down. So a person can't look up or can't look down and have a progressive inability to move the eyes, or may even have difficulty closing or opening the eyes. And the earliest motor symptoms are stiffness in the head, neck, and torso. Again, there can be poor balance and frequent falling, as well as difficulty with swallowing. And finally, FTD and motor neuron disease, unfortunately, is a situation where a person develops both ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is another type of neurodegenerative illness, as well as one of the FTD disorders. I think more commonly behavioral variant FTD, but can also be PPA or one of, I think actually it would be one of those two typically. And this can sometimes be driven, FTD ALS can be driven by genetics. I'm going to just say a few more things. There's a lot to say, and then I'm going to move away from this slide. So with FTD, genetics can play a role. So about 50% of the time, a person who develops FTD or is diagnosed with FTD, there is no known FTD disorder or neurodegenerative illness within their family history. We call that sporadic. And there's also no known genetic relationship for that person. In about 40% of cases with FTD, the person does have some kind of familial relationship to an FTD disorder. A family member may have had ALS or may have had Parkinson's, another neurodegenerative disorder, or Alzheimer's disease. And in about 10 to 20%, persons actually have a genetic relationship to FTD caused by a number of autosomal dominant gene variants. So it is true that with FTD and the FTD disorders, there's a higher percentage of genetic caused FTD than, let's say, with Alzheimer's disease, but not all cases of FTD are genetic. I am going to quickly just talk about some of our resources. AFTD has a helpline. So individuals, families, healthcare professionals can either call us or email us to get more information or to be sent free resources or to talk to a helpline specialist. And for us, that means social workers who have experience in training in the FTD disorders. Certainly our websites, both the general website and the one for kids and teens, provides a deeper knowledge and information than I can impart to you today in 20 minutes. We produce a variety of our own publications, including our Help and Hope family e-newsletter, which comes out weekly, and our quarterly Partners in FTD Care e-newsletter, which is specifically for healthcare professionals. And then a number of other resources that you see here, booklets. We are lucky to have funds where we provide grants to people that are living with FTD. So we have a respite grant for family caregivers who live with and care for someone with FTD. We have a quality of life grant for those with a diagnosis of FTD, and we also will support people to attend our annual conference. We have a number of in-person and virtual support groups across the country. If anyone is interested, if you have FTD in your family or have an interest, there are a number of ways to learn about FTD research. Currently, there's much more research going on with the FTD disorders than there's ever been before. And you can access research information at the FTD Disorders Registry, as well at AFTD's research page, which is linked here at the bottom. I'll share that I did send to Kelly my slides, so hopefully she'll be able to share those with anyone that's on the call, and you can access some of those links. And finally, I'm going to close out. So AFTD provides ongoing education that is free, and there are a number of programs. Just yesterday, there was a webinar on PSP and CBS about clinical trials. Dr. Anne-Marie Wills from Mass General Hospital, who is a Cure PSP researcher, talked about trials with these disorders, and that will be recorded and posted on our YouTube page and also on our webpage. Coming up in December for healthcare professionals, we have the Continuing Education Credit webinar on FTD genetics and clinical trials. That will be Thursday, December 7th. And our speakers will be Kim Jenny, our genetic counselor who works at AFTD, and then also Dr. Lubenkov, who's a behavioral neurologist at UCSF and an FTD specialist. And I will close. There we go. I will close with just information about our annual education conference on May 3rd. We have a conference every year, and on May 3rd, we will be in person in Houston, but we will also be available virtually for that event. And I'd encourage you to sign up to get more information about it. So Kelly, that is my presentation, and I'm going to see if I can stop sharing my screen and open up for any comments or questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Will. Yes, Tim has placed in the chat, please comment about photobiomodulation.
I do not know about photobiomodulation, so I don't know if that question, the person can provide any more information, or if we want to open up. I'm wondering if it might be something that's being researched, but I'm not an expert on the various elements of research. Has that person chatted in anything about that particular question?
I don't see anything else. So Tim, if you have more you want to add to your comment, please feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself. In the meantime, I will go to Cheryl's question next, but Tim says, someone mentioned it might help. So it sounds like it might be an intervention. I'm not familiar, so I certainly won't pretend that I am. That's something we can put on our list of things to find out about between me and Will, Tim. So if you wouldn't mind sending an email to the myalliance@kumc.edu address, Tim, we'll see what we can find out. Go ahead, Will.
And Kelly, I'll check in with, so I'm not a researcher. I'll check in. We do have research colleagues here at AFTD that work with those where we fund research, are much more experts in research. I will check in with them. And Kelly, I'm happy to email you an answer about that. And that was photobiomodulation.
Yes. So I will do some looking now while Will, you might respond to Cheryl's question, which I think is an important, timely one. Has Bruce Willis's diagnosis of FTD brought more awareness of this disease?
Most definitely. So, as many of you probably are aware, I think it was in February or March, Bruce Willis's family announced that he had previously been diagnosed with an aphasia, and the announcement was made that that aphasia was related to a diagnosis of FTD. And we certainly and they also, when they made that announcement, Emma Willis, who is his current wife, worked with my organization to have a landing page which helped to provide information about FTD and also directed callers and questions to us. So we had hundreds and hundreds, and I would even say thousands of contacts, not only in the US, but Canada and from around the world. There were certainly many individuals who'd never heard of us, family members, as well as news media who had contact with us. And certainly we really appreciate the Willis family from taking a devastating diagnosis from their own family perspective and deciding to do good by creating greater awareness. So we have really appreciated that, and we're trying to ride that wave and do more to expand that. So thank you for asking about that.
Great, thank you, Will. CBK wants to know if there is any relationship between MTHFR gene mutation and FTD or other dementias.
So the main genetic mutations that I'm aware of are C9orf72, the progranulin gene, GRN, and the MAP2 gene. There are a number, I think over 12 gene mutations that are known to cause FTD and have expanded. And repeat that alphabet soup to me again, and I have a list of genes currently.
Yeah, it's M, capital T, small h, capital F, small r, like Monday, Thursday, Friday, but that's probably not what it is. MTH.
So what I will say is we have a Partners in FTD Care specifically on genetics that we produced about a year ago. And we also have a genetic landing page on our AFTD, the AFT.D.org website. It is not one of the genes that's listed as currently known to be a variant related to FTD, but there's more research going on all the time. So I will check in on that with my research colleagues to see if there's something new that I'm not aware of. And Kelly, I'm going to ask you to spell it again.
Sure. M, capital T, small h, capital F, small r.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments that I can try to answer?
I did a little Googling, Google knows everything. And I was just typing in the chat, I'll say it out loud. Photobiomodulation describes the therapeutic use of red light or near infrared light to serve as a non-invasive neuroprotective strategy for brain diseases, including both FTD and Alzheimer's disease. And that is from, I saw this from an NIH article that was in the Journal of Geriatric Medicine, actually, as well as another journal called Lasers in Medical Science. So I hope those are two pretty trustworthy sources. But it sounds like light therapy for frontal lobe degeneration, or to combat frontal lobe degeneration in particular. The first abstract I saw says, it's promising, it's probably a good idea, but it's not, of course, the magic wand.
Yeah. So I'm glad the person asked that question. What I didn't say, I don't think anywhere along the way in the presentation, was unfortunately, currently there are no FDA-approved treatments for the FTD disorder. So no approved treatments that stop FTD disorders, that are proven to slow them or to reverse the progress. So we, part of the research that's taking place and we're excited about is more research into what are therapeutic treatments that do that. I think with photobiomodulation, it sounds like there has been some promising research, but not enough with a large enough group that it's been definitively approved as a treatment. But once again, I will check in with my colleagues to see what kind of statement they might have to say about that kind of intervention.
Excellent. Will, is there any known information about the occurrence of FTD among different racial or ethnic populations?
Well, so here's what I can say. Unfortunately, so FTD is a rare disease. I think the statistics talk about 5.8 million Americans with Alzheimer's disease. With FTD, the research that we have, we talk about roughly 60,000 people in the US with FTD. So more specific research needs to be done in relation to FTD, the specific disorders, and if there is a greater risk for certain populations, certain communities. That is better known in terms of Alzheimer's. There has been some research with different ethnic groups in terms of the representation of symptoms. And we did do a Partners in Care episode for healthcare, not episode, issue for healthcare professionals that we released over the summer about FTD and African Americans. What I will say in that there isn't any definitive information about higher risk or greater risk within African Americans. There is some information about some of the studies which have looked at different aspects. Certainly, which symptoms occur earlier with particular FTD disorders, depression or apathy or disinhibition. We need to know more about that, but there is some research in that. So right now, I think with research as well, one of the biggest challenges we have in the FTD world is connecting with and talking with diverse communities about FTD and encouraging folks to consider whether they want to participate in research. We need a much more diverse pool of participants. And I think that's even true maybe in the diagnostic world. I don't know, with Kelly at the ADRC, connecting with and providing diagnostic services to people from diverse populations continues to be a challenge, even within the Alzheimer's space.
Yes, the short answer is yes. And I will co-sign everything you just said, Will, about the importance of having anybody who's willing to participate in research, because as our director, Dr. Burns, says, the cure for Alzheimer's, the first survivor, is likely going to come from research, and that certainly includes other dementias like FTD, et cetera.
Right, and that doesn't just mean treatment research. Like they're all FTD centers across the country that are doing research more about collecting information from people that have FTD and their caregivers in terms of, the onset of symptoms, what the symptoms were, the severity of symptoms, how the symptoms progress, how quickly the disease progresses. And we need to know all those things about FTD in general, but certainly with African Americans and Latinos and Asian Americans and Native peoples. So that's something we need to keep working on.
Absolutely. Thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I'll offer one more chance to speak up. Feel like a justice of the peace. Speak up or forever hold your peace. Either in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute yourself if you have a question or comment for Will. Thank you, Will, so much. This was quite timely. As I mentioned earlier, we had someone on our webinar last week asking, who knows about FTD? So I'm so glad that we know you, Will. Thank you for sharing your time. And I'll just repeat that if anybody would like to have a PDF of Will's slides, I've got that. If you'd like it, feel free to send email to myalliance@kumc.edu, and I'll be happy to email that to you. And it's got all the links Will talked about and the helpline and the resources and all the good information that you can put into your toolbox about FTD. So with that said, I don't think I see anybody with their hand up or who has unmuted. So Will, I think that means you covered it very comprehensively. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kelly. It's been a pleasure.
So
And thank you
welcome.
for those on who've listened to me now for
Yes.
40 minutes.
My
So
goodness, what troopers. Thank you. We had 40 at our highest attendance today. We had at least 40 people who heard something from you today, Will. So
great.
that's
That's wonderful.
fantastic. Everybody, next Thursday is unbelievably, I feel like I'm not telling the truth, but next Thursday is Thanksgiving. So we will not have a webinar next Thursday because we assume you'll be having your family gatherings and watching your football and decorating for the holidays, whatever it is you do. So we will not meet next Thursday. In exchange for that, however, I'm very pleased to share with you that we will be releasing our movie Why on YouTube on Monday, so that anybody can watch it anytime. We will have the link to Why on our YouTube channel in the Monday, November 20th issue of My Alliance. So watch for that. Feel free to spread it far and wide. Make it go viral if you would like. We are super, super enthusiastic about promoting early detection and early diagnosis. And Will even mentioned in his presentation the importance of early diagnosis for FTD. So the sooner the better. And so we hope you will join us in watching Why anytime starting on when you receive the My Alliance newsletter Monday morning at 7 o'clock Central Time. So watch for that, and then we'll be back on the webinar on November 30th, and you'll see what the topic for that is in an upcoming issue of My Alliance. I have it already, I just can't remember all the details, so I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, but it's coming. Again, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you again, Will. Everybody have a great week, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye, everyone.